Jeroen, I think we are rather speechless after this masterpiece that we have just seen, based on your novel with the same title, Will. As you said in the beginning, before we saw the film, your novel is much lighter in the sense that it is put in a frame of this remembering of the old man who has to go out in the snow, and he has this urge to tell the story of what happened to him during the difficult years to his grandson. So because it is remembering, because we know all the time that somebody's telling a story, it is not so present as it is in the movie. So maybe you tell something about the relation between the book and what we have just seen.
Okay. Yeah, there's a big difference in a way that I wanted to have the reflection on the war, and I wanted the facts that I found during the occupation of Antwerp. For me, I had a responsibility, I think, well, I'm not for sure, I had a responsibility to do good research and make sure that everything that I described in the book really happened. So that was a responsibility because it was the first time, I was the first author to write in Dutch about the bureaucratic collaboration. Of course, the police are part of the bureaucracy. And it was the first time that this happened, so I had to make sure that everything was correct. And I actually invented the story around because I wanted to have a deeper reflection on memory, on war, on forgetting, and what happens to a city when, after so many decades after the war. So that was something that was my ambition. Tim Meelands, the director of the movie, is a friend of mine. It's coincidence, but he's a friend of mine. And so he really involved me in the development of the story. But I also have some experience by writing scripts for a movie. I wrote one script that was never filmed. But I have some experience. So I wasn't really like an author that wanted his book almost literally to see it on the screen. I was very open for new ideas, and I was really happy that I didn't have to write the script. So I probably would have refused it. Karel Joos is the scriptwriter. But afterwards, after the first version, I did write some scenes together with Tim. But I have to say, so I knew the script really well. And the first time that I saw the movie, that was last August, on a very hot day, together with the cast and crew, in a big cinema in Antwerp. I had big emotional difficulties. Also in the beginning, I was really thinking, this is not my book. This is weird, because I knew what was going to happen. But I think it's something really psychological, I think. It's saying goodbye. But I believe in the concept of what Tim actually tried to do with this movie. I really believe in it. So it's the psychological level. This is probably boring, but this is what happens when you as a creative person, you give trust while you're being violated. Actually, that's it. And you know that the violence is necessary. The narrative violence is necessary. And then you try to enjoy it, I guess. And that's what happened. So the difference between the novel and the movies is pretty it's pretty intense. It's pretty intense. But both novel and movie give you the same question and no answers. So that's really important. It's a movie for grown-ups. Decide yourself. That's, I think, the most important thing. And if you don't decide, it's also fine, I think.
Well, nevertheless, it answers the most important question, which that the movie begins with, and that is, what is history?
Yeah.
It's not what we learn at school, remembering dates and the names of, I don't know which important people that took part in wars and battles, but that the war is, that history is something much wider. And it has to do with the truth. But what is the truth? So I suppose this is one of the films that helps everybody to help to understand history or to look at it in another way.
Well, I think it works on two levels. I think it works on a level that history is a story. And that we evolve in telling stories about the Second World War. And that the appreciation and the analysis and reflection on the Second World War in the 50s and the 60s is different from what's happening in our century now. So it's evolving, which is in a way hopeful. Because it means that we keep on thinking about it. And of course there are people who are saying, can't you stop talking about the Second World War? Why so many books? Why so many movies? Why so many reflections on it? The thing is that this is the history of Europe. The Second World War is the history of Europe. It's our final, hopefully, final moral swamp. And I think the history of Europe goes down in the swamp in the Second World War. And intuitively, we know this. We know that something happened during those years that shamed us all. It's not and you can carry this shame with a kind of, also with a kind of lightness. You can do it whatever you want with it, but you cannot escape it. And that's why we keep telling stories about this. Why we think that the filmmakers, and me included, why we think it's important that young people see it and that they reflect upon it. We don't want them to think what we think. We want them to reflect on it in pure doubt and in pure uncertainty. And I think that our generation isn't fit to give the answers. Neither is the generation of my grandparents that actually lived through this. So we still have to pose the question, and this is what we do in a democracy. That's what we try to do. Does this make our saints? No, this makes our sinners and bastards that keep on going back to the crime scene. There is, of course, another dimension to the Second World War and the interest in the Second World War. That's a kind of obsession with it. I've met several people who are so obsessed by the Second World War that it becomes really scary and obscene even, I think. But if you keep on returning to the moral question, I think it's valid. it's valid to return to that crime scene. But for me, it's the crime scene, and of course the First World War also. For you in Slovenia, and also for us in Flanders, the killing fields of Flanders during the First World War. These are the First World War. These both define the 20th century for us in Europe, and that's why we make movies, and that's why we write books about it, I think. Yeah.
But what were the reactions of your friends, people who are close to you, and what is the reaction of the public? Were you maybe even attacked by some people who now maybe think that you are taking part into a wrong direction or something like that?
Yeah, it's funny what happened. Okay, I thought that I was writing a controversial book, and I thought, okay, this is going to be hard. The book is going to come out, and there's going to be a lot of discussion, and I better be prepared for this. And the book came out, and it was met with a huge wave of love. Incredible. Suddenly, I became a star in Flanders after 25 years in a financial desert. Suddenly, people were throwing prizes and money at me. And that's nice. But after a couple of months, I'm married to a woman who had a music career in the 90s. So she knows. And she was much popular and bigger than me. But she knows. So she kept my feet on the ground. But after a couple of months, you realize that success is a job. It's a profession. And I did all that. I accepted the prizes, and I was humble and thankful and all that shit. And I said to everybody, thank you for enjoying my book, and I really meant it. Of course, I really meant it. But there was a problem, because I wanted to debate. And I didn't get the debate. I got lots of love. And people who fall in love with a book don't want to discuss it, basically. That's really strange. So they want to talk about it. It's fantastic, you're a genius. What about, it's fantastic? Okay. That's what happened. So, because for me it's a frightening subject. It's bureaucracy turning in a psychopathic murderer. Or giving assistance just like that by a murderous regime. And for me it's serious business. But apparently for most people they said, oh, you're a fantastic writer. Really weird. You get used to this. You get used to the money also, of course. I didn't have any money. It's new for me. Spending money is new. But after a year or so, or 2 years, you get tired of it. Okay, you enjoy it, but where's the discussion? And then you forget it. Then you forget the reason why you actually wrote the book. Because success has laid a kind of fog over it. And then this movie comes out. And suddenly, there is discussion. So that was incredible. Suddenly, I got so many emails of parents who saw the movie, and they said, we're taking our children with us to see the movie again, because we want to talk about the movie and about what it's trying, and about the question that it raises. And I'm like, how old are they? They're not 8 or 9 or something. Okay, they're 16. Okay, then that's... So I got mails like that. I got a mail from a teacher, a woman, who said to her pupils that they had to see the movie during the weekend, and they were going to discuss it on Monday. And the plan was that she, of course, was also going to see the movie, but there was some family issues during the weekend. She wasn't able to see the movie. And she returned to the class on Monday. Everybody was there, and these are all 18 years old, 17, 18-year-olds. And they start to discuss the movie with her, and then they realize after a couple of minutes that she hasn't seen the movie. And they told her, go see the movie, and then we'll talk. So on Monday night, she went to see the movie, and on Tuesday, she sent me a long email. So those discussions were the discussions that I kind of hoped with the book, but that actually became real with the movie. That's what really happened. And of course, that is something that you really carry in your heart, because that's to have an actual intergenerational debate is very, very, very confrontational also. The Kinepolis group, who did the distribution in Flanders, they did it really well. Suddenly, let's say the capitalistic system became a system of emancipation on history. That was really weird, because what they did was, for the premiere of the movie, they invited an incredible amount of Instagram influencers. Most of them were young women. They saw the movie. I have no idea whether they liked it or not, but they said they did, all over the place. They kept taking pictures of themselves with posters of the movie. So suddenly, young women between 17 and 20 went in group to see a movie like that. And they were upset about what they saw. And then they started to send me emails also, and messengers and WhatsApps and whatever. They always found me, and they asked me, why did you terrify us? So that kind of discussion it's still going on, and it's really interesting, and it raises, I think, a little bit of consciousness. I'm not romanticizing it. I'm not making it. I'm just saying how it went. The reception was weird and interesting and intense.
But do you think that the Flemish society in general has dealt with the problem that have been left after the war, which is collaboration, who was on the so-called right and the wrong side, and all this? Because that's very often still an issue in many societies, including ours, unfortunately.
Yeah, I understand. It's a European matter. I think, actually, and this is really strange to say also, but from my experience, I think we did. Why am I saying this? The book got translated into French, and I have almost no connections with writers in Brussels or in Liège or Namur. So now suddenly I'm not a Flemish writer or the Dutch writer or whatever, I'm also a Belgian writer, because now it's in the two languages. And when Will came out, the French title is Trouble, which I think it's a good title. It means, of course, troubling or trouble or unclear, foggy. So I was invited in Brussels. I think I was invited in Namur twice, and somewhere in Waterloo, I think, for a French-speaking audience, talking about the book. And there it became a therapeutic session. There was always somebody who tried to raise his hand very prudently, ashamed also. My grandfather was a collaborator. I'm sorry, it's the first time that I'm actually saying this in public. And everybody looked at him and like, wow, that's courageous. In Flanders, when you say that, my own grandfather was a National Socialist. It's normal. We don't have, now we're developing a resistance culture. And it's good, it's interesting, because there's now scientific research, historical research about these brave people that resisted against the Nazis. 15,000 of them were shot. So now it's coming. And when Herman van Gutem, this is the historian that directly influenced me, put out his own book called 1942, his non-fiction book. when it came out. There's now a new edition out, but the first time that it came out, it was in the biggest auditorium of the university. Of course, he's the dean at the university, so he can actually basically order everybody to fill the room. But anyway, it was filled with people that were really interested. Many people from the Jewish community were there, which was exceptional in Antwerp. And it was a really emotional, 800 people really getting very emotional about what he was saying about the Second World War, and he himself became emotional about it. But I'll never forget what he said in the end. He said, maybe now we're at the stage that we can have a grown-up conversation about it. This is why I really like to use the word grown-up, because we're living in a kind of permanent youth culture, which is interesting when you're young, but it's not interesting for the rest of us. And the word grown-up or adult or whatever, it's important to stress here, because it means that you're at a stage in your life where you can see the nuances. And I think this is what Herman van Gutten was saying. We're now ready to see the nuances. We're now ready to not first make a moral judgment, but keep that aside. There's enough time to make that moral judgment, but because we need it. We need the difference between good and bad. But if we want to understand this, if you want to understand collaboration, we have to say to each other that we're not really interested in your particular moral judgment of people and of a time that you have not experienced yourself directly. I'm not interested in your moral judgment about this. I'm interested, if we really want to talk about moral judgment together here, then I'm interested in what our grandchildren will say of us. If we confront that, then I'm interested. If you want to be vulnerable, then I'm interested. Because our grandchildren will have basically three classes. They will divide us in three. They will say, you were a resistance guy, you were a collaborator of the regime, and most of you just looked and didn't do anything. That's what they're going to say. If you realize that, and if you accept it, then we can talk about moral judgment. If you're saying, no, 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 my generation is free of moral judgment, don't talk to me about moral judgment then. Get in the sordid pool of morality. So that's basically what I say to people about this particular subject, and that's why it's for grown-ups. It's really easy to. We don't live in an ambivalent society. We live in an ambivalent society, but we think it's bivalent. So we think it's either good or it's bad. It's either black or it's white. And everybody knows it's just gray. And it's dependent on the context and the situation and whatever. So if we can have that discussion about European history, then we have the discussion for grown-ups. If we're going to say this is a bad guy and he should burn in hell, then it's not interesting. It's not interesting that Hitler is going to burn in hell or not. It's not an interesting discussion. The interesting discussion is who gave him the power and who actually was thinking that this was a good thing and meant it. It's a good thing for my family, it's a good thing for my country. That's interesting, because then it's close. There is this, I'm doing a monologue, sorry. There's just one thing that I want to say about this. I'm very interested in the Renaissance, And I'm interested in the Renaissance of the North. I wrote also a novel on it. And one of the very important things that the people from the Renaissance and the humanist culture was prudentia, the prudence, being careful about your moral judgment also. And one of the symbols of the prudentia is actually a mirror. So she's looking in the mirror, she's checking herself. So that's what I learned from the Renaissance. When you do a moral judgment, be sure to have a mirror next to you and check yourself in the mirror. Because when you see a bastard looking back, maybe think again. So that's basically, it's, I think also the movie is a kind of, there is this humanist approach to it, confrontational but humanist. He's looking at people as they are, and that's I think that's a very important thing to do.
There is one small thing in the movie where you show, or the movie shows, how things can change, though you think they are where they are. And that is this children's song about the bear who is putting butter on his piece of bread. And it was a miracle, and I just stood and watched, looked. And that's what this commander of the police says to the boys. You just assist. You are there and you don't do anything. You just look. But then when he gets really very emotional, when those Jews are beaten and there is fire in the synagogue and all this, he is totally mad at the people who are standing and looking, doing nothing. And he shouts, "Are you on a football game?" And then there is the third level, is the writer, the author, is that his duty to write a book if the story is haunting him, or for the movie maker to make a film. Because you are haunted by the story, I think. It appears a little bit already in the book Wij, when these people, the young people are discussing, and somebody brings up that his father was a mayor of a town somewhere. So this reappears in your texts often.
Yeah, of course I'm haunted by it. There are several explanations for the fact that I'm haunted by it. One of the most clearest explanations is that my grandfather was a collaborator and a Nazi. I think that's and he didn't shut up about the war. So by a series of circumstances, during high school, I spent a lot of time with my grandparents. And at the kitchen table, it was an old-fashioned, my grandfather was a real patriarch. And he had these glasses that made his eyes look bigger. We called him the owl, because he looked like an owl looking at you. And at the kitchen table, it was always 1947. The year that he got out of jail, because he was convicted after the war for collaboration, and he spent like 2 years in jail. He was condemned for execution, but he wasn't in Belgium, he was in Germany, and then when he returned, there was a life sentence, and then it became, I think, 22 months in jail or something. So, of course, there's this involvement, and also the confusion of loving somebody, and you suspect that he did really violent stuff. He never really talked about that particular subject, but I always felt that there was something there. And there's a weird mix of love and dread, I think. um, he always invited me, for me, in my imaginations, the stories that he told about the war were like a house. And I was always welcome in the house. He always opened the door. But at a certain moment, I became older, and I was 16, and I'm in the house, his house of memories. And I was asking the wrong questions, I think. What's in the attic? There's funny smell coming from the cellar. What's there? And then he threw me out of the house with the words, you'll never understand it because you've never lived it. I think literature, or the book that I've written, is a revenge. Because I think literature can actually do this. That's the magic. I know I didn't experience it firsthand, but words can do that. Words can bring you through that emotion. Of course, images can do it much more easily, but words can do that too. And so this is why I'm haunted. And another thing is that it started with, I think, with Will when I was writing that. But afterwards, I really started to think about when. The thing is, there's this cliche about writers that they're always looking for a story. But it's the other way around. And this is the really weird, eerie, unsettling thing. For me, stories exist, and they're looking for somebody to become, to materialize. And this story really knocked on my door. And with the police, there was this police report that the historian Herman van Gutem gave to me, and I suddenly, because I didn't want to write a novel about that, because I had my grandfather, and I was fed up with the Second World War because of my grandfather. And so I read an actual police report that Herman van Gutem gave to me of a policeman who participated in a razzia. And I read this incredible document, was totally blown away by it. And it was like a story that was knocking on my door, and I opened it. I think stories are real. I think stories are organic. I think that they knock on doors of writers who want, or not, to materialize their stories. So this haunted, it's a good word, I think. Haunted means after that happened with the police report, I started to consider myself as a kind of medium. I think basically European history, but probably all of history is a kind of séance with the ghosts. We talk to the ghosts. And artists are kind of medium that try to convey the ghost, materialize them on screen or on written pages. I think this is what happens to. So haunted is a good word. Medium, I think, is also for me. It's becoming really important. So I think writing is a kind of séance where you really ask the ghosts to make themselves known.
And did you feel liberated after you had written the book?
No. The problem was, so, okay, how to explain this? The Wilfrid Wills, the main character, I heard his voice in my head. So I did the research. I did a lot of research. And then suddenly I heard him. I heard this old man. I was not thinking of my grandfather. I actually heard a voice in my head. First time I heard it, I started writing. It was always like an old-fashioned radio with the dial. There is lots of feedback and white noise, and suddenly you have this voice. So, and I was, whoa. So I started writing, and actually the scene where they in the beginning of the movie where you see with the boy and with the family. And it's different in the book, but the first pages of the book are actually the first pages that I have written. And that was really weird because I started to cry. Because I was suddenly confronted with the research that I did. Suddenly the research became real because I made it real. I materialized it into a Jewish family and two police officers, young kids, and Germans. And so it was that. And that materialized it became really confrontational. And then I knew, okay, this is fantastic. Now I have the voice. Because you have the same thing. You're crying, at the same time you're exhilarated because it's actually working. You hear his voice, you see the scene, and you know it's going to be fantastic. It's really hard when you describe a roundup of Jews, a razzia, or whatever. You're also, you know it's heavy stuff, but at the same time you're enjoying it because you're proud of being a writer and doing a good job. It's always ambiguous. But the thing is, after the book was published, Wilfried Wils never shut up. I always heard this voice in my head, and it became really oppressive. And then I got a prize, and they asked me, can you write for the prize, can you write a letter to your favorite dead author? Which is a really stupid question, I think. And I have to admit, I was thinking about Bohumil Hrabal. I wanted to write. And then I said, no, I'm going to write a letter to my main character who doesn't shut up. So I wrote the letter, and they filmed it, and I read it aloud, and then the voice stopped. So I was rid of that. And then I could write the other book, the new book. But I think it's part of my, and of course, it must sound to you foolish and maybe even arrogant, I understand. I'm just being honest. It's how I write, it's my practice. So the word haunted is good.
Are you writing a new book now?
Yeah, about ghosts also. The new book is situated in the 19th century, the end of the 19th century, also in Antwerp. It's about, this time I hear the voice of a woman. She's the wife of a banker. She's the daughter of a banker. She has a twin brother who is a typical, I like cliches, so every cliche is welcome. So he's a typical fin de siècle, Baudelaire, Rimbaud kind of character who likes to drink a lot, of course. And she tries to escape from her environment. She's a feminist, but she doesn't know that she's a feminist yet. And her favorite aunt, a fantastic woman, dies. And she returns as a ghost. And she takes possession of my character during the night, whatever. And it's the same time, it's also the ghost about, of course, we in Belgium, we have this colonial issue with Congo, of course, I suspect you know, and about our King Leopold, who was a mad thief of rubber also, and ivory and whatever. And one of the most, I think the most interesting book written about it is the book of Adam Hochschild. And it's called King Leopold's Ghosts. And I love that title, King Leopold's. I like ghosts anyway. So, and it's about spiritism, seances, my novel. It's about spiritism, seances, anarchism, colonialism, violence, and death, I guess. It's also fun, I think, I hope. I hope it's going to be fun. I hope it's going to be a kind of Honoré de Balzac kind of novel. So that's also what the French literature of the 19th century is fantastic. So it's also that. It's, I think, of course, here, did you guys actually find a little bit humor in the movie? There's not a lot in the beginning, of course, but and even then. But actually, I really like humor. I really like lots of the lightness combined with the darkness is something that I really like.
I think we have to give a chance also to the audience to ask maybe a question or two. Če bi kdo kaj vprašal, gospoda Ulislahersa, izvolite. Otherwise, I think we have told some things, not too many, not too little, I hope. So it was a privilege to have been talking to you. Thank you for your honesty. Thank you for everything you have told us. And thank you for your books, of course.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the talk. Thanks.